Yo, monkeys, it's me, DDP, the king of Bada Bing, the master of Damaka, the three-time world champion, WWE Hall of Famer, founder and CEO of DDP Yoga. Good God! And you, monkey, well, you're listening to 5 Moves of Doom. And that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing.
Hey everyone, my name is Chris Small, and on behalf of the 5 Moves of Doom, this is A and Good Day. My name is Chris, like I said, and I am joined, as always, by the only Impact fan that I do know, Dan the Beast Severncino. Dan, how you doing today?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, as always, and I couldn't do this show without you because we are specifically talking about something today that I know is near and dear to your heart. The current Australian wrestling scene is experiencing a bit of a boom. We have the Iconics on both Raw and SmackDown as the current women's tag team champions. Buddy Murphy, who revitalized 205 Live and became the first singles Australian champion in the company's history. Not to mention Rhea Ripley, the inaugural NXT UK Women's Champion, who was then succeeded by Toni Storm from the Gold Coast, Australia. And I mean, in addition, you only have to look at the Super Showdown at the Melbourne Cricket Ground last October to gauge how the wrestling scene is thriving down under. But this is now. And in this business, you have to pay respect to the trailblazers who came before you. And before any of these talented and charismatic Aussies began making their impressions and cementing their legacies, there was one man who was already making quite the impression in North America. A man, one would say, paved the way. And that man was Nathan Jones. And Dan, you're Australian. Where does Nathan Jones rank on the list of national heroes?
Well, look, he's somewhere between the Crocodile Hunter Steve Irwin and the Veronicas.
So he's in high regards.
Definitely. Not quite at the stage to have his face on our money and currency yet, but who knows?
I mean, it's only 2019. Maybe as some sort of memorial, because based on the amount of steroids that man has done and how tall he is, he probably doesn't have that many years left.
And not many people are going to say no to a guy that big who says, hey, put my face on money, please.
Well, that is a couple of years down the line, but let's go back to the beginning. Nathan Jones is born in 1969 in the Gold Coast, Australia. At 18, he's arrested for a string of armed robberies and sentenced to 16 years in Bogo Road Prison. Dan, is this behavior conducive to Gold Coast natives?
Maybe it's just like an Australian WWE thing between him and Emma Tenille Dashwood.
Yep, so grand larceny on both sides. One's a bit less extreme.
Yeah, iPhone case and armed robbery, but hey.
So what you're telling me is that Simpsons episode where Lisa is told to hide her purse, that's actually pretty accurate?
Country of convicts at one stage.
All right, so he starts working out in the prison gym to complement the fact that he's 6 foot 10 inches height, and that's 208 centimeters for you metric speakers. He discovers powerlifting there, he gets super swole, and finds himself on a work release program for a year in '94, wherein he becomes the national powerlifting champion of Australia. His pioneering ways continue because not only has he set the bar so high for Australian talents to follow him in wrestling, he also was one of the first stars to put his toes in the water for both wrestling and mixed martial arts. Believe it or not, Nathan Jones actually competed at the very first Pride event in the Tokyo Dome in October 1997. Now, Dan, I know that you're a UFC fan. Do you know anything about Pride? Did you watch it when it was around?
I didn't watch it at the start. I kind of watched a few of the fight cards on catch-up. So it is a bit interesting that he was in around 97 when a lot of matches were rumoured to be work shoots, because a lot of matches are very similar at that stage, with generally the homegrown guy going over, but the foreigner getting a few good shots in.
Well, it's really interesting because, I mean, a lot of people who are UFC fans now and maybe got in because of stars like Jon Jones, Conor McGregor, they really don't know how big Pride was. At one point, it was the second largest company in the entire world. And really, the only reason it kind of caved in was because it was just so heavily backed and influenced by the Yakuza.
Yep. A lot of money going around there, and how quickly did that fall down, though? And
it kind of makes sense then that, you have the local guys kind of going over the evil foreigners at that point. It was a sense of nationalistic pride, including Nathan Jones. He is in the very first Pride event in a very weird match. He's up against Koji Kitayo, who's a sumo wrestler who made Yokozuna rank. And if you watch this fight, it's almost an identical scenario to Brock Lesnar's UFC debut against Frank Mir years later. Like Lesnar, Jones starts out strong, quick, and then Koji just takes him down and immediately makes him tap in 2 minutes. Now, Dan, after such a devastating defeat, what did Nathan Jones have to say about this?
Well, it seems to be claiming it was a work shoot, which a few ex-fighters have said about working in Pride in those days.
But while he is in Pride, he does get some wrestling lessons. So Tom Howard, who's over in Pride, is also a pro wrestling teacher and imparts some wisdom, or tries to impart some wisdom onto Nathan Jones. And then he begins his illustrious pro wrestling career beginning in 2001. So
we need to talk about the World Wrestling All-Stars, where if you thought WCW was bad, imagine WCW. We're paying the guys less money and less production values, and that was the World Wrestling All-Stars.
Oh, that just sounds horrible.
Yeah, so it was Australian touring promoter Andrew McManus started it in Sydney. The whole idea with it was going to travel all around between Australia, Europe, and North America. I think they only did about 5 pay-per-view cards, and it was a bit weird because there was no build-up. So you'll basically have Sting versus Lex Luger in Scotland, but absolutely no reason as to why they're feuding other than just asked to pay a pay-per-view fee to watch it. And Nathan was part of the first main event, which was actually a guitar on a pole match against Jeff Jarrett.
Oh, color me shocked. And how did old Nathan fare against the Double J?
Well, he lowered his colors, got hit by Jeff Jarrett, who delivered a stroke on him, and I think the match was done and dusted in less than 6 minutes.
You know what? That seems like it's safe working time for Jones at that time. He's probably only wrestling for about, this is his beginning at this point, and we know what he turns into later. Spoiler alert at that stage.
Yeah, so watching those two, you can't really be all that critical of Nathan Jones in WWE in 2003 if you actually did see how far he came from 2001.
So there was improvement, is what you're saying?
Vast improvement. One incident I did see was him tripping off the top rope in a match against Scott Steiner.
Oh, God.
So I think when he did go to WWE, they just instilled in him how to work a bit safer. And also work as a big man, as a big man, you can't be doing flying arm drags and off-the-top rope moves.
So you're saying that he wrestled a match in 2001 against Scott Steiner?
For the bout.
You know, the term 5-star match is thrown around a lot these days, but you've witnessed this match. Please, take us through it. Tell me what your thoughts and feelings were.
Well, I'll put it this way. With the production values of WWA at that time, I don't think they had the option of replays, and I don't think they were going to any replays either.
Well, someone must have seen something in him, spoiler, it's his height, because he signs a developmental deal in 2002. And in 2003, vignettes start airing that begin playing on a prison escapee coming to WWE. And when Jones finally debuts on SmackDown, he is immediately aligned with The Undertaker and begins working as his protege. In his very first match, before he's wrestled even once on WWE television, he's scheduled for Wrestlemania 19, teaming with The Undertaker against The Big Show and The A-Train. Now, Dan, I know that you were saying that you weren't watching as regularly as you are now back then, but do you remember this match? Did you watch Wrestlemania 19?
I actually did watch it. I was still watching the big matches with WWE at that time, and it was just really weird because they just put him in a spot that he just wasn't ready for. Congratulations to WWE. I think they did make the right decision to double down on him and having The Undertaker work the match. The whole idea was that Undertaker faced off against The Big Show and A-Train / Prince Albert by himself because they had attacked Nathan Jones before the match, but he comes out, delivers a spin kick, doesn't really look all that beat down either, just wasn't accustomed to selling at that stage. But look, Undertaker just shows the workhorse that he is.
I think that's the thing because Undertaker, he's known as a locker room leader, right? And he has an affinity for big guys, and he's known to take them under his wing. And from what I understand, in this match, to make sure that Jones is up to the task, he invites him to his private land where he has a wrestling ring on it. And he tries to train him, and he tries so hard. He invites him down to just train. And when that doesn't work, they go over basic drills. And when that doesn't work, they choreograph the entire match. And when that doesn't work, then we do this run and angle. And I'm just thinking, the legacy, like Taker's going to have 5-star matches at WrestleMania in the future. But his opponents up until that point, he faced Giant Gonzalez at WrestleMania 9. And he's in there with 2 veterans in the Big Show and Prince Albert / A-Train. And all 3 of those men are workhorses and good. So how bad does Nathan Jones have to be to not even be trusted to stand on the ring apron and get the hot tag?
Yeah, if you think about it, Nicholas from last year's WrestleMania actually had more ring time than poor old Nathan Jones. But I guess it's one of those things where, growing up and even recently, you sort of look forward to the, Goliath versus Goliath match. And a lot of times there's just like a different dynamic that the big men have to work. Because you can watch a big man throw around a cruiserweight and a light heavyweight, and that's entertaining. But to actually have 2 Goliaths butt heads and go one-on-one with each other, it does take another level of working. And obviously Nathan Jones wasn't at that level. Even if you do watch his SmackDown matches on the network, it's mostly him just competing against a smaller opponent. And I would say The Undertaker did the right thing, because if he embarrassed himself at that WrestleMania, there would just be no going back.
And you're talking about those SmackDown matches, and there really aren't many. He has his TV debut 2 weeks after WrestleMania on SmackDown and is almost immediately sent down to Ohio Valley Wrestling. Now, knowing what we know about how much of a hothead Jim Cornette is and how he was the head booker / he ran all of OVW at the time, what do you think that he thought of old Nathan when he came down?
Look, I think with Jim Cornette, he does treat people who have a background in the business a lot differently to guys that came in from bodybuilding and whatnot, and people who are doing it, to get into movies and whatnot. So I'd say Jim Cornette probably wasn't pleased that he was needing to sculpt another bodybuilder.
Yeah, very true. I mean, I guess one of Cornette's big thing is, of course, legitimacy in WWE and wrestling as a whole. So I guess seeing this big 6'10" powerhouse might have done something, but as soon as he begins to move, I can just see the veins throbbing, the spittle flying. It's, to be a fly on the wall.
The tennis racket and baseball bat going into car windows.
So Jones comes back in October as part of Team Lesnar for that year's Survivor Series. And that team is the hossiest Hoss team that ever hossed. You've got A-Train, Nathan Jones, Matt Morgan, Brock Lesnar, and Big Show. Now, they talk about, a combined thousands of pounds in the ring at all time, but that was like a legitimate giant mass of muscle and HGH.
And anger.
And anger. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, did you watch that match? Do you remember anything about that one?
I remember that match because it was John Cena kind of going face out of nowhere. Look, they did make him look clumsy in that match, because it was just definitely one of those ones where, you got a guy holding an opponent down. Of course, he moves towards his opponent. He gets out of the way, hits his teammate. It was one of those really basic worked Survivor Series matches. Look, it was actually a really good card, the 2003 Survivor Series, and I think that kicked off the show as well. Or was it a second match, maybe?
Yeah, I think you're right at that point.
But look, at the end of the day, it's a good way to hide a guy that's green in a 5-on-5 match when you've got Chris Benoit and Kurt Angle on the other end.
So this is November, December 6th. He's on a tour in Australia, and he gives his notice and just flat out stays in Perth on that tour due to the hectic schedule, he claims. So when all is said and done, the guy's on WWE TV for not even a full 3 months. And I mean, we're bagging on him, and we try to be positive. I don't want to be too negative, but think about the legacy. Like, people who weren't even watching in 2003 still hear of Nathan Jones's name. How bad do you have to be to have that kind of mark on the wrestling world?
Well, look, I mean, a lot of people over time, because it was about 16 years ago, you don't remember his matches, but you just remember his physique and just his look. And that is one thing that Nathan Jones had, was a look. And in terms of the way the current wrestling industry is now, it is what it is. But if he was back in the territory days where you could go dominate a town for 3 to 4 months, have your comeuppance, lose to the babyface, and then keep moving. He could have had such a long and big career, but I guess with the work rate that's required, and it just that touring schedule just obviously wasn't a fit for him, because seeing how much he had improved in those 2 years for someone who wasn't a natural athlete, someone who wasn't a natural wrestling fan, definitely if he had a few more years, we could be talking about him more favorably. Because the other thing as well with WWE, a lot of big men, we forget just how bad their initial runs were. I mean, you think about Glenn Jacobs having the Isaac Yankem and Fake Diesel run. You think about the Festus run. You think about the way they treated Mark Henry in the beginning. And you also think about guys like Kurgan and Matt Morgan, who they were big men that just never really set apart. So it was going to take the WWE a few more years to know what they had with him if he did keep wanting to improve. But I guess at the end of the day, the whole touring schedule wasn't for him, and he decided to start a career in Hollywood.
So yeah, of course, a lot of people these days will know Nathan Jones because he is such a physically striking individual. His first big role was in Troy, facing Brad Pitt, Jobs in 3 seconds. But before that, he was actually in a little movie called Police Story 4.
Yep, with Jackie Chan, filmed in Australia.
Oh yeah, there we go. Now, what can you tell us about Police Story 4, Dan?
Oh, not much. I mean, even if you watch the credits, I think he's credited as hired goon number 4 or something along those lines. But, the other thing as well, like going up against Jackie Chan, he just looked even more of a beast.
Absolutely. And then a couple of years ago, you know what? He was in Mad Max Fury Road. And I gotta say, he was pretty entertaining.
That was such a good movie. I was expecting just to be anti-Fury Road because I love the originals, and I guess all remakes are really hard to do, and especially something like Mad Max, which was something you look back fondly of Australian cinema and action, and hey, he was great in it.
Mm-hmm. So, all in all, 3 months in WWE, world champion for 5 days in WWA, one-time Pride competitor, 2 minutes of an MMA career, 2003 Pro Wrestling Insider, 2003 Pro Wrestling Observer, winner of Worst Wrestler and Most Embarrassing Wrestler. It's quite a legacy he leaves behind, but I mean, going back to what you said, do you think he was before his time, maybe, or after his time? I mean, you talk about all of these things about being in the territory days and about having a bit more run, but I mean, even it was such a weird time for a WWE. There really wasn't a developmental system per se, and those territory days were gone.
Yeah, look, he was at a stage where every match you had was filmed in one way or another. He just definitely needed to, I guess a lot of guys call it excursion these days, where put a mask on them and spend a bit more time overseas, and then when they're ready. So, look, you can see it in multiple ways, but at the end of the day, I feel like when you do look back at Nathan Jones, you feel like he didn't overstay his welcome, and you feel like there could have been more improvement, and you're not going to roll your eyes as much as when you hear the name Great Khali.
Very true, and that is probably his legacy. Not the worst big man to ever grace WWE. All right, guys, that is A and G'day for this week. Dan, thanks for letting me take the piss out of one of your countrymen. Next time we'll do it for a Canadian, but hey, they're all good wrestlers, so we're going to have to dig pretty deep for that one.
Jinder Mahal is Canadian.
He is also a WWE champion. Fight me. All right, guys. In the meantime and in between time, please make sure that you subscribe on Podbean, on Spotify, wherever you do get your podcasts, and be sure to follow us on social media at 5_MOD on the Twitters. We will see you next week. Dan, thanks once again.
Thank you.